Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, JD. And it's, not everything works. And I'm sure Simon and AJ have vouched for this because I've worked with them for many years doing this. Not, we sometimes we think internally we have a great idea, but it doesn't necessarily fly in the channel. And it might well have been a good idea. Just because it didn't work doesn't mean it wasn't a good idea. I think what's important is you measure it as you go, and that can be very quick. It could be a week, it could be a month. But if it doesn't work, some parts of it might work. So you change up the incentive on the fly based on what's working. And the important point of all of this is if you're using automation, then you will have the ability to see if it's working or not. So that's, what's the old thing? If you're going to fail, fail fast, basically.
I would absolutely agree with that, Kenneth.
Yeah. And then the ability to do it in a targeted way, right? Just because you launch a program, you don't have to launch it out to everybody. You can do it with a smaller test segment and see if it drives traction, then expand. So lots of power and capability. So, but anyway, we're going a little afield, and I was determined to keep us on track and on time. So Kenneth, you have the next question, sir. And so I'm going to turn to you now. And so we talk about reward types. I think Simon mentioned it, cash versus points versus different things. So what about that? Cash, rewards, points. How do you win that partner mind share, build that loyalty? What are some of the experience that you've worked with both AJ, with Simon, and many other companies? What are some of the things that you see in the different scenarios?
Yeah, no, there's a lot. Yeah, no, thanks, JD. I suppose a lot to that question. So I suppose fundamentally, you're working with partners. Partners expect to be rewarded for bringing their in-customer business to you as a vendor or provider. And honestly, those incentives can be a key differentiator in helping that partner make the decision to bring their in-customer business to you. And that's regardless of, points, cash, or how you build that loyalty into it. So that's one of the four core principles of, why vendors incentivize partners in the first place. And there are lots of challenges. I think Simon made a great example there of you're migrating from on-premise or traditional to cloud. So therefore, you need to evolve your program to now deal with cloud products and maybe incentivize those much more great than you would the traditional on-premise. There's many different ways to reward partners and lots of incentive types, like, the question you just asked me. And I would say some of the considerations or some of the things you need to think about when deciding the reward type is, like, are you rewarding the partner company, for example? Generally speaking, if you're doing a rebate, you will pay cash to a reseller or traditional partner. If it goes into a distributor, generally it's credit. You have to ask yourself, the next question then is, are you rewarding individuals in the partner company? And when I say partner, that could be anything from an MSP to a VAR to a distributor, etc. Or whatever it is. There's so many different partner types out there in our ecosystem today. You have to kind of deal with all of that. Again, another good reason why you need automation is because there are so many moving parts. You also need to ask yourself, and this is where it gets a little bit more complicated, are you rewarding multiple individuals? When we do spiffs now, we see, in fact, some of the best spiffs that work is you're not just targeting the salesperson, because behind every good salesperson, there's going to be a technical organization, an SE, a technical person, maybe helping them with a demo or a proof of concept that AJ alluded to. Have you done a demo? So influencing the people behind the scenes can be a little bit more tricky, but with a lot of the vendors we work in, the more successful incentives, they've figured out a way to incentivize those individuals behind the scenes who are supporting the salesperson, which actually drive the salesperson in a particular direction. So, a lot of moving parts there. Now, in terms of the program, you have to think, is that program designed for long-term loyalty? Or are you looking to hit a short-term goal like a competitive situation? Or you want to drive partners with something that's very long-term? Other considerations you need to take into account is, is it a global program? Is it local? And you have to keep in mind, and I think one of the guys mentioned it, you can't do certain things in certain countries due to tax regulations, etc. Even in some countries, say in Europe, not so much anymore, but it used to be, the certain partners don't want you rewarding their individuals. They're fine to take it as a company entity. And then I suppose your overall budget for the program, you need to take into account, I've got a budget, I want to maximize how I can pay out, with the budget I have. And I touched on it previously. The speed of payment is really, really important. I think it's one of the most important things that we've learned, is that if you can pay a partner or an individual very quickly for doing the behavior that you wanted them to do, which is in line with the goals of your company or your channel program, that's definitely makes a huge difference in terms of uptake and the competitiveness of the program. One of the other questions we get asked a lot is, how do I avoid paying out for what would have been considered run rate business? A lot of vendors really struggle with this question. That, well, and this is where finance might push back, and you would say, well, how do you know they wouldn't have registered that deal anyway or taken that training anyway? And look, honestly, I might even ask AJ to jump in here, because I know you guys have grappled with this a little bit and got over it. There is no easy answer to that, but I would say what you need to do is measure the program as you do it, and you definitely can prove over time that if you didn't do the reward versus if you did do the reward, you do see an uptake. I think it's pretty consistent, and we have metrics to kind of show this, that if you say I'm going to pay on deal registration or deals of a certain size, etc., with and without the incentive, there's definitely a notable difference. I don't know, AJ, do you want to comment on that particular point of run rate versus I wouldn't have got it anyways?
Sure. So it is definitely something we've grappled with and had to have kind of mathematical justifications around all of the incentives we run. And ultimately, it comes down to the hard truth of, as you mentioned, it's unavoidable. If you're paying on all business within a certain subset, some of that will be run rate. So if you know the delta between what you expect and what you're hoping to get, you factor in what you're paying out on the run rate business as part of the overall cost of the spiff. So that's the basic mathematical formula to begin with. But there are some other benefits that are even with the same business. Let's say hypothetically, you didn't increase overall business at all. If you're trying to make your year number, quarter number, you will accelerate close rates with an incentive if it has a deadline. So that oftentimes in many high growth companies can be as important as profit. If you're a growing company and your end game is to get acquired, go public, etc., and you have absolute numbers you have to hit, sometimes that alone can justify the additional run rate you're paying on.
Yep. No, really well said. And you can see, and this is really where automation kicks in, because you could say, I know what my pipeline looks like. I know I have 500 registered deals across 100 partners or whatever it might be. And then I go and I do a targeted spiff to the sales people that are in charge of those deals, because I have that data, and I target them if you're going to close this quarter. So, we've run very successful programs with AJ and others to accelerate that deal closure so companies can hit their numbers or indeed grow their numbers. And then I suppose lastly, JD, in terms of, going back up to the top of what you asked me about, points, cards, cash, etc. There's never one right answer, but I would kind of say, typically for the larger organizations like distributors, usually they get incentivized with credit. Mostly partners are cash, and then individuals, definitely a trend towards cash, much less interest in cards. In fact, I would say it's like 90-something% now is cash, because it's easier to hand out, it's easier for them to take and go spend, etc. And there's cards they're actually more expensive to administer and give out. Now there are lots of good card companies that do this, and there are good reasons to do that. I'm not taking from it, but I'm just saying the trends we see is predominantly towards cash. In terms of the points, it definitely is important and it has a place. But when you're doing a points-based system, it's more a long-term loyalty, and it's quite effective, but it's not going to take you out. It's not going to make any difference when you're in a competitive situation versus having some kind of an incentive to pick you over the competition. So yeah, that's hopefully, JD, that kind of answers the gist of the question.
I think so, but Kenneth, I'm not the judge. That's going to be up to our listeners. I hope it did answer the question. If it didn't, I would encourage you to reach out to us through our website, through our marketing, or you can find us all on LinkedIn. Feel free to continue the conversation, but we are going to keep moving on. So thank you very much, Brenda.